All righty, everybody. So I've started the recording. So we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome to the workshop Navigating Review Types. I am Becca Billings, and we are going to go through some of the more common review types that you might see in literature. Um, a few housekeeping things. James is going to be watching chat for me, and he might put in a few links here and there based on some of the discussions. So keep that in mind, and I'm happy to answer questions. Feel free to put in any of your questions in the chat box, and I'll probably get to those at the end of the workshop, or not workshop, more like a webinar, I guess. And you all have access to all of these slides. After the recording today, we'll get the recording sent out to you. You can have my PowerPoint slides, and feel free to share them with your colleagues and other students that might be interested in this topic. I'm happy to share all of the knowledge I have. You can have my computer. So this information will probably be added to one of our LibGuides as well. So we'll go ahead and get started today. All right, I wanted to start with this quote: "Research reviews are essential for synthesizing knowledge and informing evidence-based practice." Now, while librarians are not going to be involved with creating or being part of the study designs when it comes to trials or mixed methods or qualitative methodology and research, we are very involved when it comes to reviews, but very specific um, uh, expertise and role among the research teams for a variety of reviews. And that is what we are going to focus on. Because more and more publications are coming about, more and more primary studies are being published, it's important to be able to use another publication, the secondary sources like your reviews, to synthesize all of that information. And I am coming to this more from a health perspective side because we work with the health sciences faculty and researchers. So evidence-based practice from what we do at Lister Hill might be different depending on your subject specialty. But by finding a variety of by finding a variety of research on a topic, you're able to find and analyze to solve with a holistic approach what is out there for your patient population. So quick activity from the audience today. We are going to be focusing on about 8 review types, but I'm interested to know how many review types you are aware of, or how many review types you think there are. So, chat, I'm interested to see what you think that number is. 14, okay. 5, 8, yes, definitely at least 10. Any other guesses? All right. So there are actually 48 review types that have been identified. No! And we're only focusing on 8 of those today. So, and actually, let me forward a couple of slides to just show you where I'm getting information from. Um, some important readings that I have after some of the main review types that we are going to be looking at. This article, I'm giving you a list of resources where you can get more information. So this article by Sutton and Andrew Booth from 2019 is a newer article that is focused on mapping the review types because there are so many of them. And as you were doing research, sorry, there's still some people to be admitted. I actually did not think I would have as many participants today. So thank you all for taking time out of your day to attend. So this Andrew Booth article looked at, they were able to analyze a variety of different reviews and distinct methodologies of each of them. And to kind of streamline it and make it a little easier to understand, they were able to group them into 7 families. Now, this information comes from a typology of reviews, which is a core article that analyzes 14 review types and their associated methodologies. There's also a really good good resources in Cochrane reviews. And also, James, if you would put this link from the University of Melbourne, their research guide, this will show you that LibGuide is based on that newer article by Sutton and Booth, and it will show you the family trees. So the first, so let me back up again. So the types of reviews that we will be focusing on are going to be narrative reviews, which are your traditional reviews. And this is one map or one branch of the different reviews that are out there. Under traditional reviews, you have critical reviews, integrative reviews, there's ethno or ethnography, and there's something else. And then you have various systematic reviews out there as well. And there's even more from there. But these are the reviews that we work with the most at Lister Hill, because our role is creating the search strategies to find all of the evidence depending on the scope of your project so that the researchers can then analyze it and synthesize that information to make their points in the research. These are just quick definitions that you have that I wanted to provide you for each of these main study designs, but we're going to go in and get into the specific review methodologies in the next few slides. Anytime you're doing research and you're wanting to do review, I want to encourage you to ask the following questions before you get started. So the first thing is, why are you wanting to do this type of review? There are dozens, literally, of reviews that you have access to, and each one has a specific purpose, looks at specific outcomes. So where a systematic review is usually the gold standard and people always want to do a systematic reviews aren't able to answer certain types of questions, especially when you're questions about qualitative research. Those aren't necessarily ideal for that. Where if literature review or a narrative review, that is not necessarily going to be appropriate at making final decisions about a therapy, for instance. So they are all important, but they do different things. And one is not necessarily better than the other. However, you do have a different strength and rigor in the methodology that you should be aware of, which may or may not be needed depending on what your goal is. What is it going to add to the literature? Another thing to ask is, what is your time frame? Certain reviews are going to take longer than others. A literature review, that could take a month or a couple weeks. Rapid reviews take a few months or less. Systematic reviews, scoping reviews, they can take up to 2 years. So keep that in mind. A lot of that also depends on your topic and how much has been published on that subject area. So consider the search as well. Some searches need to be very comprehensive depending on the review that you're working on. And with that comprehensive search, you might be getting thousands of results. Other times, if you're doing literature review, it's very specific in scope. So you might be getting 10 to 30 results to screen. Another good tip is to have the journal in mind that you want to publish in. The journals will have author guidelines, and they will also give you information on if they publish reviews or not. Some journals won't publish scoping reviews. Some journals will say we don't publish concept analyses. So keep that in mind. And also the journals will usually give you some really good templates or a structure that they want you to follow, which will save you time when you are trying to write your manuscript. A big factor is also your team members. Consider your team members. Make sure you have a strong team when you're doing any type of review. And what is their expertise? When you're writing reviews, it's good to have a variety of expertise on your team. So you might have stakeholders that are pushing the project, organizations that need that information to inform policy. You might have your clinical experts, your practitioners that can give a different angle. Your librarians are sometimes needed to do the searches. You might need a statistician. You consider those things before you get into the start of your reviews. And here are some other questions like, are you planning to combine and analyze the studies for overall effect? Are your studies going to be homogeneous enough for a meta-analysis? Are you going that route at all? What's your inclusion and exclusion criteria? So those are just some examples here. All right. So first up is narrative reviews. So narrative reviews are your traditional reviews. These are going to be usually broad in scope. Your questions that you start with are broader in scope. They're going to give you a good overview of a topic, but they're not necessarily summarizing all of the literature that you are including. It's really you're summarizing parts of the literature, but a lot of what you're getting is an interpretation uh, of the author's perspectives and experiences as well. These review types are going to be descriptive or narrative, and authors can choose to arrange their ideas chronologically by a specific concept or thematically. Um, it is summarizing findings, but again, that author context is really important here. And researchers are able to really show their expertise on an area. These are very flexible review types as well. So you are looking at the state of the literature. You're not necessarily looking at the state of the literature in a very comprehensive way, uh, but they are good to identify themes, new trends in the research, issues that might be coming up in healthcare, identifying knowledge gaps and direction for future research. Now, these reviews are really great to look through if you're new to a topic and you want an understanding. These provide great overviews for learning, and they're also really great pieces of literature to teach about a specific topic. Now, as far as the methodology goes, narrative reviews are not rigorous at all in their approach. So there's a lot of flexibility on how you can write these. Oftentimes you'll see these will also provide recommendations, but again, they cannot be used for a final decision or solution to a problem because they don't have enough rigor and reproducibility in the methodology. And oftentimes these can be a little biased, which is fine for these types of reviews because they're not there to give a final answer to something. There's no standardized protocol for these. There's no systematic reporting. You don't have a comprehensive search that is required for these types of reviews. And there's also no quality assessment that is being done on the individual studies that are included. So these make them more biased, so lower level reviews. As far as who can write these reviews, experts or novice researchers and graduate students, these are perfect places to start. So you can have literature reviews that have one or two authors, but then I've seen many narrative reviews that offer recommendations that might have a large team. So these are some good examples of different ways that you can write a narrative review. So this first one is going to follow that IMRAD, the introduction, methods, results, and discussion, conclusion. I think I did that. If I messed up, I'm sorry. But here, this one is really structured, and this Charnley article also does provide their search strategy and their methods. So that is really a unique way to do a literature review that wasn't always done in this way before. And I have noticed that more and more narrative reviews and our researchers here are reporting their searches that we help them with, which is really good. It really just strengthens the evidence. Now, I wanted to include that traditional narrative review example as well that is sorted by theme. And this is an example where they do not specify a search or a strict methodology in their review. So you can go back to those and take a look too. Now, as far as further reading on how to conduct a narrative review, I've included some other resources. So this Cheney 2021, so you want to write a narrative review article, it's really helpful. The Ferrari writing narrative style literature reviews is also really good, and they're not long. They kind of give you a quick overview and examples. Okay, next up are your integrative reviews. So integrative reviews are comprehensively reviewing and synthesizing the literature on a particular topic. They combine findings from a variety of literature and methodologies to provide a holistic understanding of key issues. So this definition was given by ChatGPT, but it was actually really helpful. There are not a ton of publications on conducting narrative or integrative reviews. Um, but the seminal article is going to be Cornucopia and the Whitmore and Knopfel. So what's unique about the integrative reviews is it gives a holistic approach and it looks at a variety of evidence to help answer questions. And this is one of the few review types that allows you to do this. A lot of times, whenever you're looking at a review, they might focus on specific study designs. So you might have a systematic review of interventions that's only looking and including studies that are randomized control trials, because they are the type of studies that answer those therapeutic questions. But there are other topics where you need a variety of expertise and you need a variety of study designs to help answer those questions. So the methodology is strong with the integrative reviews. It's not going to be as comprehensive and structured as you would find with a scoping review, but you are starting with a question. You are doing a pretty comprehensive search of the literature for those primary and theoretical studies. And then you are analyzing those and synthesizing them, usually with a matrix table of some sort, some data extraction. It's not required to then do a quality assessment of the included studies with an integrative review. And because you're not doing an assessment of quality, it's still going to be a lower level, but these are also really powerful reviews, especially if they do include, which is optional, a quality assessment for the included studies. They can inform decision-making to improve patient care. And they do have direct applicability to practice and policy when they are done well. This is also a study design that does use a lot of theory development. It can enhance theories or create new theories as well. When we get questions about integrative reviews, those are 98% requested by nursing. There's a lot of teamwork involved with the nursing profession, and so they are often using other experts as well to create theories and improve practice and policy change for their patients. So pretty much all of the integrative reviews, they're often going to have some kind of nursing care component. These are really great for graduate students as well, other scholars, healthcare professionals, a variety of team members and expertise. You should have a librarian conducting searches or at least peer reviewing a search if you are wanting to take it on your own. Now, I included this slide from ChatGPT because actually using AI to just get a quick definition of these study designs is really helpful. So I've done it a couple times, but I really liked how they put into perspective what integrative reviews are. So when you want to do an integrative review is when you have a research question that has a lot of diverse perspectives that can help, or different methodologies that can help answer the problem. It's also good to, if you have a complex phenomenon or an issue that can't be designed or answered or understood through a single study design. And if you're looking to develop or improve theoretical frameworks, these are also great for that. Okay, and then I just have some examples here of some integrative reviews that you can take a look at. This one was Andrew Booth is a librarian, and he's published a lot on different review types. And so they're also doing the search in this article. So usually if you have a librarian on a search, it makes it a stronger review article as well. So that's why I included this. And further reading for integrative reviews, I have the seminal article by Whitmore from 2005, as well as a newer guide for nursing students that are interested in conducting integrative reviews. This is a good place to start. Okay, next up, we have your mapping reviews, also known as evidence maps, and scoping reviews. So I put these on the same slide because for the most part, they are the same. The Joanna Briggs Institute manual uses these terms synonymously. So for scoping review and mapping reviews, they are exploratory review types that are often looking and assessing the evidence on a broader topic, or if you have multiple questions, you're going to want to start with the scoping reviews and mapping reviews. So you're identifying key concepts, theories, you're looking at the breadth and scope of a topic, and you're really trying to see what gaps are there in the research. And then those reviews can be taken as a preliminary step to then doing a more rigorous systematic review on a topic. Your evidence maps do the same thing. Usually whenever you're doing a mapping review or an evidence map, they are going to synthesize and present the results in a more tabular way. So you're going to see a lot more graphs, a lot more images, where scoping reviews are going to be more narrative in focus. And let's see, as far as the methodology goes, and every review that I'm going to talk about going forward today, you want to be sure that you are being very methodical with the way you're conducting these research papers. So mapping and scoping reviews are exploratory because you don't know what is out there necessarily on your topic, and you're trying to get a lay of the land. But they use a very systematic approach in their methodology, which makes them powerful tools. They can take a long time to complete, just like with your systematic reviews. So you want to start with a specific question, or a broader question in this case. But then it is a good idea to have some type of protocol in place for your team. A protocol is a plan of action that allows you to specify what your question is, what is your predefined inclusion and exclusion criteria. So how are you going to select studies? And then how are you going to extract the data? What specifically do you want to know about each article? And this is really based on what your question is. Now, these are going to be resource heavy. You're going to end up with a search that yields thousands of articles in most cases, so be prepared for that. You want a bigger team for the scoping reviews and mapping reviews, and going forward systematic reviews, because they can be very resource heavy. With scoping reviews, you're going to want to include gray literature, so unpublished literature that might not show up in the databases. So think about conference abstracts, publications that might be unique to organizations that you're a part of in your subject specialty. These can really enhance the evidence and give different perspectives. Now, you don't need a risk of bias assessment. You can use critical appraisal tools of the included studies, but it is not a requirement. It really just will make the evidence stronger. These are appropriate for graduate students, but you do want to have a mix of subject experts and researchers too on your team. I say a minimum of 3 screeners so that you have that unbiased, as much as possible, methodology where you have 2 people voting, and then you have somebody resolving any conflicts that might come up. And then you also need a librarian to be doing the reviews or doing the searches for these types of reviews. There are a couple scoping reviews where I'm just peer reviewing and assisting graduate students to do the searches themselves, but usually we meet fairly often to just make sure that they're on the right track with translating, because it can take a lot of work. And these are just some examples of a mapping review versus scoping review. So this this mapping review is about 78 pages long, but you can just see the difference between all of the graphs and charts that they use to synthesize the evidence and present the results compared to the scoping review. And here is further reading. Let's see. This Arksey and O'Malley article is a seminal work on scoping studies. So often in the methodology where they're presenting their search strategies, they'll say we followed Prisma format, which is just a reporting standard, showing that they filled out and reported all of the information of their methodology to make it methodical and reproducible. A really great chapter to look at is this chapter 10, Scoping Reviews, and the JBI Evidence Synthesis Manual. And then Trico publishes quite a bit on scoping reviews as well. So take a look at those before you get started with a scoping review. On JBI's website, it gives you a template on how to conduct scoping reviews, and there are a lot of resources as well. Okay, so next up are your systematic reviews. We get a lot of requests to do systematic reviews, and they can take just as long as a scoping review. Again, resource heavy. The aim of systematic reviews is you are starting with a very specific research question. You are identifying the literature with a thorough, comprehensive search across numerous databases. Then a research team screening through the evidence and appraising that literature, and then synthesizing everything in a very rigorous manner. These reviews have to be very transparent, and they have robust conclusions and recommendations based on the evidence, the quality of the evidence, and are used to inform clinical guidelines and policy decisions at the highest level in healthcare. So with the methodology, same, you have the clearly defined question. You really need to start with a protocol. The protocol, again, is your plan for the team. How are you going to handle or solve resolutions with screening? Who is going to do what? What search strategies are going to be used? Where are you searching the literature? And then what tools are you going to use for risk of bias, etc. Now, this review type, and then going forward with your rapid reviews and umbrella reviews, you have to use a risk of bias tool, which is different from a quality assessment tool. Well, quality assessment tool is an umbrella term for risk of bias and critical appraisal. With systematic reviews, in order for them to be considered a systematic review and have that rigor, they have to use a risk of bias tool to assess the methodology of the included studies. So if you were doing, again, a systematic review on interventions, the ROB tool, risk of bias tool is going to be a risk of bias tool that you're going to want to use to assess the included articles. Now, tools like CASP or your critical appraisal tools that are checklists, those are focused strictly on applicability of the literature for your population. Can you use this study design for my patient population? Where risk of bias doesn't care at all about applicability, it's only looking at the methodology. Does it have a sound methodology? Was this conducted well? To look at the quality of the evidence holistically. With systematic reviews, you need to have experts in the research area. You should have professional experts. You need a methodologist, which isn't the librarian. You should really have somebody within your school, like you have mixed methods experts, qualitative experts if you're doing a qualitative systematic review, but really get a methodologist that can help with a systematic review, be a part of your team. It's good to have a stats person if you're wanting to later do a meta-analysis, and you need enough people for screening. This is not ideal, and we don't recommend graduate students to do this, especially as a first-time publication, because they can take so much time, and it's quite overwhelming when students start to get into them. They realize what all they have to do. Just keep that in mind. Make sure that you have somebody who's already published systematic reviews as well to be on your team to guide you through that process. And you have to have a librarian on your team as well to conduct those searches and be the search methodologist. This is just a visual of the steps that go into conducting a systematic review. At the end of the month, I'm going to do a more detailed steps of systematic reviews and scoping reviews, preparing for them. But this is just kind of a good step-by-step overview of what to expect. This is just a systematic review example that you can take a look at. And further reading, the Cochrane Handbook for Systematic Reviews of Interventions is going to be the go-to resource for those RCT type of systematic reviews. However, there are a number of different systematic review handbooks depending on your subject specialty. So there are other resources that you would want to look at instead if you're doing a systematic review in engineering or social sciences. And then also the JBI manual, they have some really good tools. And the PRISMA 2020 statement is the updated reporting guideline for systematic reviews and what you need to report about how you conducted the study so that it's transparent. All right. So next we have rapid reviews. Basically, rapid reviews are a systematic review that has an expedited methodology. So there is something about the methodology that is being omitted so that you can get the evidence quicker to stakeholders. So these are really only done for time critical decision making or clinically urgent questions. So sometimes we'll get requests for rapid reviews, but it's really just a literature review that they're wanting, but they're wanting the results quickly. So that is much different. It's very rigorous. And a couple shortcuts that they might take in a rapid review is they're only maybe searching in one or two databases, where a traditional systematic review, you would be looking at 5+. You might not have screeners, like multiple screeners at every single stage. Or another big one is you're only often looking at very high level studies for your rapid reviews. So you're only maybe including guidelines or RCTs specifically, or maybe you're just looking at other systematic reviews and RCTs just to speed up that process, so that the quality assessment is not going to take as long because you're already looking at authoritative sources. Rapid reviews really do not need to be done by students at all. It should be done by experts in the field who already know the literature very well. These are some examples of rapid reviews. So these are pretty time-sensitive issues in healthcare on why they're doing rapid reviews. The second one, this was one that came out during the pandemic. Mental health was a big issue, it still is, with the younger people due to COVID. So this was one that was also published, so you can take a look at that. You also usually have stakeholders that are behind the rapid review, that maybe it's a hospital or an organization like World Health Organization will ask researchers to do a rapid review on a topic so that they can make a change in policy quickly. And then there's some further reading. So there's not a lot of guidelines on rapid reviews currently. It's more of a new topic. But there's some really good training opportunities that you can take for free. The Cochrane Rapid Review Methodology Work Group. If you go to this link, there are training sessions and more information that you can get on how to conduct rapid reviews. All right, so two more. So the meta-analysis, and last we'll end with the umbrella review. So the meta-analysis, it's a research process used to systematically synthesize or merge findings of a single independent study or of single independent studies using statistical methods to calculate an overall or absolute effect. So from the librarian's perspective, our role doesn't change whether we're doing systematic review or meta-analysis or rapid review. The search is going to be very much the same. These are really used, especially your network meta-analyses. These are used to understand the efficacy and safety of specific interventions. These are a powerful tool that you have to have a statistician for. You have to have that math person to be able to do the meta-analysis. But basically, a meta-analysis is a systematic review that is going a step further to use math to calculate the overall effect and success of something. So you'll often see a forest plot up in the upper right-hand corner. That's the Cochrane Collaboration forest plot that analyzed 7 randomized control trials and actually made a big change in healthcare for, actually, I can't remember what it was. It's like pregnancy. But this is a really powerful tool for decision making. But again, you do have to have a statistician, and in order to do a meta-analysis, the final included studies need to be homogeneous enough to be able to look at the effect of the results. So questions about that, you definitely will want to see the people in public health and the biostatisticians. This is an example of that. You'll see the forest plots describing the success of an intervention or if it favors the placebo or not. And then again, these are just really good handbooks or chapters on conducting meta-analyses. All right, last up is umbrella reviews. Umbrella reviews are basically systematic reviews, but they are only analyzing other systematic reviews. So you're still getting an overview of the evidence on multiple topics. The umbrella reviews are usually a little broader with their question in order to encompass all of the other systematic reviews that they're going to be analyzing. They are really great for developing clinical guidelines, and they're very useful because more and more systematic reviews of topics are being published. So you kind of have to have a good way of synthesizing the systematic reviews as well. Interested to see if we'll have some type of review analyzing umbrella reviews at some point. Let's see. Oh, so with umbrella reviews, like I said, they're only analyzing other systematic reviews that have that strong methodology. So because of this, they can't analyze those lower level reviews like your narrative reviews or integrative reviews because they don't have that same uh, methodology and rigor across the board. This is also one where you're going to want to have that variety of expertise. Not ideal for graduate students as a first-time publication, but being on that team and having that experience is fine. This is an example of the umbrella review and further reading as well. There is a chapter in the JBI Manual for Evidence Synthesis, and the JBI Manual for Evidence Synthesis is a really helpful book and talks about a variety of the different reviews. So lastly, there are many other reviews that are out there. So you have critical reviews, realist reviews, state-of-the-art reviews, etc. We don't usually see these as much, but they are available to you. State-of-the-art reviews are usually doing a fairly comprehensive search, but of very current literature. Often you'll see them on technology issues. Critical reviews fall under, again, that narrative review, traditional review type. They're solving wicked problems, and there's often a hypothesis that is the result for more research to be conducted. And then you have like network analyses that are looking at multiple interventions at the same time, which is a very high level review. And then concept analyses, you're identifying and clarifying ambiguous concepts or theories. So there's been one that we've done on nurse well-being, because well-being is so broad, it's trying to define what that means. And then there's several others that we're working on, but these are some other options if maybe those review types that we discussed earlier don't work for your topic. There are some really great tools that are out there to help you determine what type of review you should do. So I'm just including these here. So they're also especially helpful if you're trying to determine whether or not to do a systematic review, some specific flowcharts to look at. Okay, there's a few more slides. And as far as the variety of expertise, whenever you're looking at those higher level reviews, like I think it would start more like systematic reviews, rapids, umbrella, and metas. You're gonna, again, want people who have a variety of expertise. So methodological expertise, clinical or topical expertise, searching the landscape of the evidence. That's where the librarians come from or come in. Your biostats for meta-analyses, and then there's often some type of stakeholder or consumer that is the driving force for why a review is going on. And then it's always great to have people on board that can help with the screening, making sure that everybody on the team is well informed on what the inclusion and exclusion criteria is and what the topic is. Having a solid team is going to make the reviews go a lot faster. Okay, and almost done here. I might not. So as far as, I just wanted to include this slide. Librarians and information specialists, as far as their participation in systematic reviews, are correlated with quality reporting, higher quality reporting of search strategies, and therefore that is going to result in more quality information that is being captured and not missed in order to come to conclusions. Searching the databases can be very overwhelming if you're not used to it, so we are happy to help with that. And this is just giving information on how we as librarians can support review teams. Often our role is at the very beginning. So if you're doing any of these higher level review types, please get us at the beginning. Because that's where our expertise shines. So we can help with reframing or framing your research question. We can give feedback on your protocol or your plan as far as the search strategies go. our involvement is database selection, creating those searches, and then writing up the search reports using Prisma search guidelines. And then we can also help with data management and using a variety of tools to streamline your review process, like Covenants, EndNote, and there's a lot of other tools as well. Right. So in summary, each review does have its place in the literature across multiple disciplines and research questions. It does depend on your research goals and context, so one review is not better than the other. And just, you don't have to memorize any of this, just look through some of the review types, understand the basics of their methodology, and it's going to help you approach your manuscript in the best way. And again, these slides are yours if you want them, and the recording will also be available after this. So I'm going to open it up to questions.
First, we have a question from Ashley, who asked, and didn't want to forget it, how do you recommend navigating co-authorship or lack thereof for librarians and faculty graduate students who are working on a review together?
That is a really good question. That is something that you definitely want to discuss in the first couple meetings that you have. And it depends really on how involved you want the librarians to be on the team. So if you're really just wanting some help framing a search or helping you with some resources, that's not going to necessarily involve authorship. We do rely on, and James helped me with this. It's like the ICJ. Oh, I can't remember the acronym, but there are organization standards that we also look at to see if we're qualified for authorship that you want to, base that decision on, as well as are we available to be an author at that time? If we're doing the searches and we're writing up the search methodology for systematic reviews, we do require authorship, but
Uh,
a lot of that is negotiable. Yes,
that
ICMJ.
JE. Yep. And then we have a question from Dr. Donaldson. What is your experience with different definitions slash criteria for systematic reviews in other fields? For instance, in my field, learning sciences, here's a definition of systematic reviews synthesized by 4 AI tools. A systematic review in the learning sciences is a rigorous and transparent approach to synthesizing research evidence related to learning, instruction, or educational phenomena. It involves a systematic search for, appraisal, and synthesis of a range of evidence, including empirical studies, theoretical papers, design documents, and other relevant artifacts. Reviews may seek to test, refine, or develop theories, and they must explicitly consider the context in which research was conducted and the potential for generalizing findings.
Yes, and that's a really good question. So with the health sciences, mostly what we're focusing on are intervention-based systematic reviews or psychology, nursing questions. And so that's where our expertise is as far as those databases go and those manuals like JBI and Cochrane handbooks, which are very focused towards health sciences. But there are a lot of other manuals for different subject specialties. And so far, we have gotten maybe 1 or 2 requests from the education, one from computer science, uh, and psychology, but the psychology topics we usually treat with like the Cochrane Handbook, JBI manual rules. For the most part, the librarian's role is going to be very similar across the board for subject specialty, but there are specific manuals that you are going to just have to look up in your field. But the types of study designs that you're including is also going to help direct what type of systematic review you're doing. So if you're doing an intervention systematic review, that's going to be a quantitative intervention systematic review where you're just looking at randomized control trials. Then you have your qualitative systematic reviews where the evidence might just be qualitative studies. It really depends. But so far, we haven't really assisted with any systematic reviews, for example, in business or engineering. But what we would do is just look up in those fields to see what has been published, what manuals might be available on conducting systematic reviews in those specialties. Any other questions? Well, if that is all, I appreciate you all coming. I will stop the recording for now, and you're more than welcome also to email me with other questions if something comes up later too. Thank you all very much.
Melissa, I can include Becca's contact information in the email I send out.
I can't figure out how to stop the recording. It's not letting me.